Thank you for allowing us to be here, Professor Stephen, Dr. Mushir Rahman, of course, Professor Mustaq Khan, along with my, of course, very dear friends, Tabit and Shamim Patwari. Both of them are very dynamic in their own capacity, along with other participants. So it's a very interesting topic that we talk about. But of course, upgrading, when we talk about the upgrading in terms of economic context, we must understand that there needs to be a holistic approach on key policies, but also very segmented approach towards microeconomy. So that's one part of it. A lot of individuals have spoken about different ideas, different sectors, but I just want to take a note on a different context itself. Of course, a lot of policies, good policies are again there. Unfortunately, some of these policies do not see the light, or they are too slow. By the time they actually pick up, the opportunities are lost. As such, I always say that whether our preparedness is there to have the benefit, the opportunity that may come forth. Of course, I belong to a area which is the first beneficiary of the Padma Bridge, which is going to be inaugurated on the 25th of June by the Honorable Prime Minister. I always say to my constituents and others who are they're engaged in their own capacity, whether we are ready to accept the opportunities that are coming forth. Unfortunately, we are not. We are more of a reactive nature than a proactive nature, and that is, I think, one of the way to actually simply express my view on the economic cycle itself. In terms of the indicators, a lot of focus has gone into skill set mismatch, which do exist. A couple of years back, I myself, along with one of the industry leader who also used to be a president of MCCI, Mr. Nasim Manzoor, who also leads the Leather Exporters Association. We were just having a discussion. We took up a couple of initiatives, whether to see that whether we can have the skill set matching with the private sector as well as with the public sector. Unfortunately, the growth pattern that was expected of the leather industry has not been achieved purely because we lacked the skill sets and the numbers of workers that were required. We just could not get it into the system. So that was one of the biggest challenge. Then again, I'm just giving a couple of examples from my end that we initiated. Then we started off with the vocational education. We wanted to create with polytechnic institutions in Bangladesh in 64 districts. I think there is 59 polytechnic institutes. We wanted to create, or we proposed creating an incubation center. And the focus of the incubation center was a public-private partnership. As in, the areas that had demands of certain trades or crafts, we wanted to integrate that into the polytechnic as an investment from the private sector, so that those investments creates jobs. And unfortunately, that also failed, unfortunately. So when I say my failures, of course, these very, very interesting ideas that we see, a lot of projects that we see. We're talking about Digital Bangladesh. We're talking about incubation center through Sheikh Rasul's Digital Lab. A lot of other good ideas, but unfortunately, unless you have the private sector engaged as a collaboration, you will not be able to get the optimization, because public sector fundings unfortunately do not have accountability. So that's from my end. Then of course we talk about, it's very pleased to hear and very elaborated discussion by Professor Mustaq Khan regarding financial mechanism. And again, accountability, when we talk about accountability, we have to talk about standardization. We talk about quality rather than quantity. And that is where the mismatch still exists in the financial institution. although we are creating a lot of jobs, public sector or the private banks are very open to promote the industries, but then again, it is not diversified. The former governor and of course the former finance minister, late Abdul Muid, he promoted a circular through Bangladesh Bank asking all private banks to give 5% of their capital dispenses on green energy, but it hasn't taken any effect. It just has not been implemented, unfortunately. I have the paper on me, but then again, when I go into the banks, they are just not implementing it because they do not see a viability in terms of investment. Again, when we see about the viability, capacity building from the likes of MCCI, FBCCI, and other associations, they need to take a lead role in terms of creating a benchmark. I am very much honored to be part of the advisory board of E-Commerce Association of Bangladesh. Again, about 700 e-commerce companies. But then again, as of recent time, just we created the policy for standardization. It's been 4 years in the running, and just recently this year we have just set the standard and the policy on e-commerce. Again, it's a big business. It's a $2 billion business in the making. So e-commerce is flourishing. Just as of recent, they had their first election. So it was a very disciplined election and so forth. Again, standardization is must, and the associations and each of the industry leaders, they need to take a lead in terms of capacity building. BGME has been brilliant in terms of their standardization. Bangladesh is very much has optimized its RMG sector. Although it's been mentioned by Mr. Abu Yusuf, $4 billion is been sent out of Bangladesh on higher level management capacity for the RMG sectors, mostly from India and Sri Lanka. So there again, are we able to create the jobs on the top tier? Unfortunately, we haven't. Javed Akhtar is one of the few Bangladeshis who are leading the MNCs. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case even 3 years back. So that's where I think it needs to be, we need to put our focus on. The Honorable Prime Minister has been very, very proactive in terms of promoting private sector. The 100 economic zone that we always talk about. Again, I would really request Dr. Moshir Rahman and others who are there, along with, of course, we have to be accountable as well as policymakers. That's why these 100 economic zones hasn't just picked up. It hasn't. Only 30% of the 100 economic zones has gone into operations. And again, the lacking is there, I do understand, because the Padma Bridge will give access to a greater segment of the southern part of Bangladesh. My eminent friend Shamim Patwari has talked about Rampur. Of course, he belongs to that division. Rampur has seen growth since the 80s, early 80s. We from the south hasn't seen any growth for a long and the longest time. 50-year celebration has happened in Bangladesh. So bigger 21 districts in southern areas are and will be benefited by Padma Bridge. But again, whether we are prepared to actually take that benefit. So, of course, and one of the other sectors that I really want to highlight, and Shamim Patwari and myself, we are both of us is in the Climate Parliament Bangladesh Forum Chor Development Board that we are promoting. Again, it's a very sectoral and need-based analytical approach that we need to take. We cannot standardize everything in one platform. It has to be very need-based analytical approach for different areas and sectoral approach. And one of the sector that I see that a lot of people do not focus is the informal sector of employment. The ILO do not consider informal form of employment at all. They do not take that into their numbers. 48 million of the Bangladeshis are involved in the informal sector of employment. What are we doing for them? Are we standardizing them? Are we providing them facilities for their growth pattern? We are not, unfortunately. And I think that's where I think we are lacking behind. Some of the few issues that I have mentioned. Unfortunately, I don't want to elaborate any further because it's been almost 2.5 hours or 3 years crossing. The Honorable Prime Minister's advisor is the National Skill Development Authority has been set up for the last 3 years. Hasn't had effect as of yet. They do not know what are their oversight, what are their focus areas. It's under the Prime Minister's office, the National Skill Development Authority. So the good practices have been adopted. Unfortunately, application is lacking. And I think Chief Economist of World Bank has mentioned, of course, we do not have time. Time is of essence. 2040 is the population dividend. We are expecting that it will finish. Maybe 2050 could be the number. But then again, I think the Honorable Prime Minister has focused on infrastructure because that is one of the primary requirement for any growth pattern. And now with the Podda Bridge, I think all of the countries is unilaterally being connected. I think now we need to focus on quality and implementation. I think that's where I think we all need to participate in our own capacity. Thank you so much.